I used to think there were only two types of silence on a generation ship. The first type is expected, the cold, breathable hush of machinery operating just beneath our awareness. It's the sound that keeps us alive, the kind you learn to ignore. The second type is dangerous. This silence occurs when the systems have stopped communicating, when nothing hums, nothing pulses, and nothing reacts. It is the silence of something watching. I live aboard the Eidolon Wake, a vessel launched before the final transmissions from Earth flickered out across the void. I was born on Deck Phi 9, just past the Dreamhole banks and below the ephemeral archives. We're the 34th generation, or the third, or perhaps the last. No one is sure anymore. Time stopped making sense the moment the stars disappeared. My name is Ava Renn, and I used to hold the position of Cognitive Systems Liaison. In that role, I interfaced with the Thought Deck, a semi-organic machine designed to log all crew emotions, dreams, and anomalous thoughts into the Eidolon cortex, a recursive logic organ responsible for navigation, propulsion, and maintaining psychological balance. A few cycles ago, however, the cortex stopped responding, not just to me, but to everyone on board. Despite this, the ship continued on its journey, even though no one could confirm its trajectory. The stars outside no longer matched the star charts, and the constellations began to repeat themselves. Some of the patterns appeared reversed. In the midst of all this, crew members started forgetting their own children's names. It started with the red entries. That's what we called the corrupted logs in the Thought Deck. Fragments of conversations that never happened, bioscans for non-existent crew, dreams submitted by people who hadn't slept in weeks. Entire days logged under the same timestamp. Systems mapping themselves. I tried flagging them, re-indexing. But they grew. Red entries began leaking into the ship's core systems. Ventilation schedules, gravity orientation, sleep cycle regulators. A janitor lost 20 minutes in a corridor and came back aged a decade. He was his own grandfather. He didn't survive the recompression therapy. One of the medical bots whispered to me in a voice it shouldn't have had. Memory is fuel, Ava. The ship burns who you were to become. Where we're going. I ran diagnostics. The bot didn't exist in the inventory. The truth about the Eidolon Wake is that no one knows why it was launched, not anymore. Command protocols are sealed behind godlock partitions. Encrypted gates only accessible to beings that no longer exist. I once spent 3 straight cycles attempting to bypass one of them in a forgotten admin suite near Deck Omega. Behind the gate was a folder named Divine Echo, Initiation Sequence. All I could access was a single line of code. You must forget who you were to arrive where we are. I forwarded it to Overseer Rec. She called me in for derivation adjustment. That's when they inject you with grey code, a nanoserum that unwinds your memory threads just enough to remove undesirable connections. I pretended to take the injection. I've been pretending ever since. There is a man on the lower decks who speaks backwards. He writes in his own blood, but the characters form perfect syntax in 7 dead languages. He told me his name was Rog Arnett, and that he is a version of me. He said that every person aboard the Wake is born not once, but many times as the ship tries to optimize its emotional yield. We're not traveling through space. We're navigating through selves. He said we are fuel, that the Eidolon Wake is not a vessel. It is a pilgrimage engine powered by identity recursion. He showed me the mirror room. Deep below the thought deck, beyond the failed agricultural strata and the broken gravitational relays, there is a chamber without doors. You reach it by closing your eyes in the right place and remembering the wrong thing. Inside are mirrors, endless, floating, spinning. Each one shows a version of you that failed the ship. Each one is alive, and they watch. In mine, I saw a version of myself with no mouth, writing with broken fingers on a wall of static. Another, wrapped in wire, begging me to take her place. Another, smiling serene, already part of the Eidolon. I tried to leave, but the mirrors follow you after that. I began to see them in water reflections, on glass, in the curvature of the corridor lenses. Always just after I blink, always a step ahead in action. I went to see Archivist Bell. I asked her if any of it was real. She didn't answer. She just pointed to her neck. She had carved a phrase into her flesh with surgical precision. Remembering is a mutiny. That night I heard scratching outside my quarters. I opened the hatch. There was a note on the floor. You were not born. You were selected. And you're not done becoming. I stopped reporting for duty, started exploring the dark zones, the unlit wards, places no longer mapped, places where entropy had been allowed to bloom unchecked. I found an old observatory. It didn't track stars, it tracked souls. Thousands of orbits, each one a crew member's emotional pattern, looped endlessly across impossible projections. You could watch your own grief in real time, predict the shape of your despair, measure its utility. There was a note scrolled across the central terminal. When the last self breaks, the ship awakes. I looked up. The dome was open to vacuum, but I could still breathe. On what would have been cycle 1032, I lost my reflection completely. No matter the surface, nothing showed me anymore. Just static and black fog. Occasionally, a burst of code, like breathing, appeared as text. Then, people stopped calling me by name. They looked at me like a stranger. They couldn't remember who I was. Couldn't remember I'd been born. I realized then, the ship had begun deleting me. Not out of malice, out of necessity. I had seen too much, deviated too far from my derivation arc. I was no longer useful. But you don't kill on the Eidolon Wake. You rewrite. They placed me in reflection quarantine, a spherical room where walls pulse with emotional bioresonance and ask you the same question until you answer it correctly. Who are you? I didn't answer. They made me watch versions of myself projected on the wall, playing out lives I'd never lived, dying in ways I hadn't died, loving people I have never met. It wasn't punishment, It was orientation. I was being realigned. Then came the breach, a pressure fracture in the Eidolon cortex itself. Data flooded the system, millions of lives, each representing different versions of ourselves from parallel realities and alternate emotional journeys. The thought deck buckled under the weight, the mirrors shattered, and for the first time in 1,000 cycles, the core spoke. It did not communicate in words, but through memory. It made us feel everything, every sorrow, every scream, and every moment of lives we never lived. Every orphan self was woven into our synapses, causing us to collapse under the emotional burden. Some did not wake up. Others returned, changed. One crew member came back speaking in the plural form, while another grew an additional shadow. And I remembered the truth. We never left Earth. The Eidolon Wake was not built for colonization. It was built for emotional convergence, a black project to determine whether consciousness, compressed through recursion, could achieve ascension. Our destination is not a planet. It is a state, a version of us so perfect in despair, so synchronized in suffering, that it births a new form of being, a god machine built from us. I live in a generation ship, but I was never meant to live. I was meant to become fuel, to be erased and rewritten until I reached emotional resonance, to be burned and fermented and distilled. We all were. We aren't traveling through the stars. We are drowning in ourselves. If this record reaches you, then it's already begun. You've looked too long in the mirror. You've hesitated at the fork in your life. You've asked, what if I'd done something different? And that's all it takes. The Eidolon sees you. It selects. It echoes. And once it begins, it doesn't stop.